This is it. This is the B-29, the plane you've been waiting for. And it was worth waiting for. It's the biggest, fastest, mightiest heavy bomber in the world. It can travel farther and higher than anything else on wings. It has a pressurized cabin, permitting high-altitude flight without oxygen masks. It has 5 remotely controlled, electrically driven turrets, each carrying twin 50s, with a 20-millimeter cannon added to the turret in the tail. Yes, the B-29 is everything you've been promised. And the pilot who flies one has an enviable job. Important, glamorous, and tough. Here's a B-29 pilot. He's measuring the distance between pin centers on the left landing gear. This part of the job isn't so glamorous, but it's the pilot's responsibility to make sure that everything on this biggest bomber in the world works properly. If you were a B-29 pilot, here's exactly what you'd have to do before an operational flight. Check the nose wheel. See that the tires are inflated to 45 to 50 pounds per square inch. While measuring the pressure, look over the tires for general condition also. Watch out especially for cuts or signs of serious wear. One of the ground crew will replace the dust covers, but you're still responsible for his work. After you've measured the pressure in both tires, give the gear a visual check. The strut should be clean, with a clearance between pin centers of 10 inches. And the shimmy damper must be full. That's important. Make sure the rod is almost up to the notch in the gauge on the shimmy damper reservoir. Now you can look over the engine cowlings on your way to the other main landing wheel. This gets the same inspection you've already given its mate. The co-pilot ducks into the wheel well to inspect the equipment there, while you work on the wheels. Measure tire pressures again. On these tires, the pressure should be between 75 and 85 pounds per square inch. Inside the wheel well, the co-pilot examines the wires, connections, and switches. He makes sure all the cannon plugs are on tight, paying particular attention to the plugs on this motor, which opens and closes the nacelle doors, and also to the plugs of the normal and emergency landing gear motors. Then he turns around to examine his side of the strut. He looks it over and inspects the brake lines, making sure that the hose is not chafing and no fluid is leaking. Meanwhile, you're checking the clearance between pin centers again. 13 1/4 inches. Right. Now, are the wheel chocks in place? One behind the inboard tire and one in front of the outboard tire, just as it should be. Next, check the cowlings, inspection doors, and inspection plates. You've already examined some of them, but you must be sure all of them are okay. The other members of the crew help you out with these inspections. Here, for example, a gunner tests the fastening of the top cowling. But you'll have to check the security of the other coverings, and there are a lot of them all over this ship. While you're walking along, you can examine the wing seams. Fluid leaking from them means trouble. Now to check the ailerons and trim tabs. All control surfaces and all trim tabs must be inspected. Test the tabs for excessive hinge play by shaking them, and see that the gas tank caps are tightened. If there were extra fuel tanks in the bomb bays, their connections would have to be examined. But now the pilot and the co-pilot continue their tour around the plane. They have a lot to check. Hatches, windows, control surfaces, trim tabs, inspection plates, and doors. But the pilot and co-pilot aren't the only crew members with inspections to make. The gunners, for example, besides helping the pilot check the airplane, must also be sure the guns and gun cameras will work properly. They must inspect all 5 turrets in the same way they're now examining this lower rear turret. After they have the dome and gun cover removed, they see that the ammunition moves freely in the chutes and is correctly loaded. The guns just don't fire with the cartridges in backwards. They also check the safety wiring on the gun mounting bolts, up in there. Then the gun charging switches are put on reset. That conserves the CO2 pressure, which automatically charges the guns. Finally, the gun camera is inspected. Enough film, speed set at 16 frames per second, lens adjusted to the brightness of the day, and the interval control put at the desired number of seconds and turned on. And this turret is all right. The dome and gun cover can be replaced. The tail turret is checked by the tail gunner. But again, the pilot is responsible. If the guns fail, he gets the blame. so he watches the tail gunner as the shutter-all feed mechanism is inspected. Now the other gunners only have to lock the latches. Elevation latch locked. Azimuth latch locked. The doors are shut and fastened, and the gunners can go to another turret. And there's still more work to be done. Each engine must be pulled through 15 blades, with only 2 men per blade. The engineer takes care of that. He sits at his position, making sure that all switches are off, while the 4 engines are pulled through. And now the co-pilot puts on his clothing and collects his equipment before joining the rest of the crew for inspection. Notice that the crew members wear fatigues while making their inspections and change into flight clothing only when they are ready to enter the plane. The examination of the exterior of the airplane is completed, so the crew can fall in for the check of their personal equipment. That's the last item of the before entering the airplane part of the procedure, and it's strictly the pilot's job, your job. You are responsible for the men as well as the plane. If they fail, you're at fault. Each crew member must have his electrically heated flying clothing, parachute, oxygen mask, knife, a quart of water, and Mae West. Steel helmets and flak vests are already inside the ship at the positions. Apparently, these men are completely equipped. But don't think they only have to climb into the ship and fly away. There's a lot yet to be done. Let's go along with the pilot again and see what he has to do to take a B-29 into the air. He climbs in through the hatch in the nose wheel well. That entrance is also used by the co-pilot, engineer, navigator, radio operator, and bombardier. There's work for every man before the engines are started, during engine starting and warm-up, before takeoff, after takeoff, and then a whole list of additional things to do before landing again. As soon as the radio operator gets in, he climbs back to close the pressure door between the forward compartment and the forward bomb bay. The bombardier is the last one in, so he closes the hatch. The gunners close the pressure doors in their compartment. They also open the cabin pressure valves, which will now automatically maintain the cabin pressure at the desired level. 3 compartments in the plane, the pilot's compartment, the gun control compartment, and the tail gunner's compartment, are sealed off from the rest of the fuselage and supplied with this compressed air. The cabin pressurizer keeps 8,000 feet altitude inside the plane until the outside is at 30,000 feet. If the plane gets higher than 30,000 feet, the pressure inside drops off gradually, but it is always 13.4 inches of mercury more than the outside pressure. But let's get back to flight procedure. The gunners take care of the other pressure door in their compartment. But what about the pilot? That's you. You already have your chute fastened, your Mae West on, and the seat adjusted. So you put your throat microphone and earphones on. If you put the mic on first, you won't get so badly tangled in the wires. Don't forget to plug in your disconnector cord. Now to start work. Ask the engineer for Forms 1, 1A, and 01-1-40, and look them over. Be sure that everything on Forms 1 and 1A has been checked. Pay particular attention to the list of defective equipment. If anything vital is out of order, it must be fixed before taking off. The weight and balance computation is in Form 01-1-40. That's important. Make sure it's correct. When you've examined all the forms and signed them, you can give them back to the engineer and tell him to start the putt-putt. You have to turn on the emergency ignition switch. The tail gunner looks after the putt-putt, starting and stopping it on orders from the engineer. But now, you set the jackbox selector switch to command and turn on the proper command receiver and the command transmitter. This puts you in communication with the control tower. Now examine your own equipment. Look over your oxygen mask and make sure your portable oxygen bottle is fully charged. Then try out the cockpit lights. To test the ultraviolet lamps, turn on the switches and twist the shutter. You should then be able to see the light. By turning the shutter back, you can control the amount of ultraviolet light emitted. Next, try out the alarm bell. The gun commander will tell you if it's working. Then depress the brake pedals and pull out the parking brake knob to set the brakes. Look over to the control stand and make sure that the emergency releases and switches are correctly set. power transfer switch, emergency landing gear release, emergency bomb release, emergency cabin air pressure release, and pilot's over control. Now unlock the control surfaces and throttles by moving the locking lever on the aisle stand full forward. Then release the throttle brake and test all 4 throttles through their entire range. Take it easy. Move them slowly and gently. All controls on the B-29 should be handled in this careful manner in order to prevent damage to the mechanism. There's no need to push hard. And the co-pilot doesn't just sit and read the checklist. He must test the action of the control surfaces, moving each surface, elevators, ailerons, and rudder, through the complete range. The gun commander looks from his blister, observing the response of the surfaces, and reports to the co-pilot. A similar test is made on the trim tabs. The co-pilot turns the 3 control wheels as far as they will go in each direction. That big wheel on the side of his control stand operates the elevator tabs. The aileron and rudder wheels are on top of the control stand behind the throttles. The way the trim tabs follow the setting of the control wheels is also observed by the gun commander, who tells the co-pilot over the interphone how the tabs move. The co-pilot turns the tabs back to neutral after testing them. And now to try out the wing flaps. But first he calls the side gunners on the interphone to make sure none of the service crew will be in the way of the descending flaps. When the gunners report that it's safe to go ahead, the co-pilot presses the flap switch to the down position and holds it there until the flaps have been lowered 15 degrees. 15 degrees is enough to tell if they're working all right. The co-pilot can't see the flaps, of course, so he watches the wing flap position indicator. But the gunners can check visually. They tell the co-pilot if the flaps come down all right. So now he can bring them back up. The gunners, again, will tell him when they're up. Don't start thinking the gunners have nothing to do but watch control surfaces and flaps. They have their own checklists to follow. The right side gunner, for example, is looking over his supply of spare lamps and fuses. Yep, that's okay. But now you, the pilot, are almost ready to start the engines. See that the automatic pilot master switch is off. Check over the 4 sets of control surface adjustment knobs, making sure all their pointers are up. Then set the manifold pressure selector to the 0 position. And depress all 4 propeller RPM switches to the increased position and hold them there until the lights on the co-pilot's instrument panel flash. Now you're all ready to start the engines, and the rest of the crew should be too. They check in with the co-pilot, reporting in this sequence. Bombardier, who sits directly ahead of the pilot and co-pilot. Navigator, who is some distance behind the pilot, facing forward. Flight engineer, who is directly behind the co-pilot, facing aft. Radio operator, who sits across from the navigator and faces the right wall. Gun commander, who is in the top of the fuselage amidships and can face in any direction. Left gunner, who faces aft. Right gunner, who also faces aft. And the tail gunner, who stays close to the putt-putt during takeoff and landing. His combat position, of course, is in the tail. Everybody's set now. Warn the service crew outside you're going to start the engines, and tell the engineer to start number 1. And number 1 engine spins twice. And now he turns the fuel boost pump on, closes all the throttles except number 1, sets the fire extinguisher to number 1 engine, presses the starter switch to energize, and then flips it to start. And finally turns the magneto switch to both. You have to push the throttle to 1200 RPM and signal for number 2. The same procedure is repeated until all 4 engines are running. Now that the engines are going, vacuum pressure is available to operate your gyro flight instruments. So the gyro compass and the flight indicator can be uncaged and set. The co-pilot will be doing the same with his gyro instruments. Next, see if the other vacuum pump is working all right. Have the engineer switch to the pump on the number 2 engine. The vacuum may drop some, but it should go back to about 4 inches. Now you can call the control tower on the command radio. It's already on. This is about the right time to get your taxiing instructions, since you'll soon be ready to move out to the runway. At the same time, ask for the field barometric pressure so you can adjust the altimeter. It must be set carefully to the correct pressure, in this case, 29.84 inches. Obviously, an accurate altimeter is a vital necessity, especially if you may have to fly on instruments. Next, you want the bombardier. You know he sits back with the navigator and the radio operator until the ship is in the air. But right now, he has to come forward to make the final checks on the bomb sight. He's already completed the regular pre-flight inspection of his equipment. All he must do now is see that the bomb sight is entirely ready for takeoff. The directional clutch should be disengaged and the secondary clutch engaged by turning it clockwise. Then the drum wheel must be turned counterclockwise as far as it will go. That does it. He's all set to take off. And now you're ready to close the bomb bay doors. Ask the ground crew outside if there are any obstructions underneath the plane. Everything's clear, so you can order the bombardier to close the bomb bay doors. He throws the door switch while you look back through the pressure door to watch them shut. The rear bomb bay door is looked after by one of the gunners, who will tell you when it's closed. When both doors are shut, the bombardier can go back to his takeoff position in the rear of the compartment. And you're almost ready to taxi. But you'd better make one last check of the turret warning lights. Uh-oh, that lower rear turret light is on. Call one of the side gunners and have him take care of it. Perhaps the turret wasn't stowed. Forget about it, gunner? Well, it's easy to fix. Get control of the turret, press the action switch, and stow it. That does it. There, that turret warning light is off now. And everybody's set. Switch your jack box back to command and signal the ground crew outside to remove the wheel chocks and get a safe distance away from the airplane. The co-pilot warns the crew to stand by to taxi. And you can release the brakes and move the ship out to the runway. While taxiing, or whenever the plane is moving, all crew members watch from the windows and keep the pilot informed of obstructions. The gunners can provide the most help since the blisters give them a wide view. This is a big airplane. It's mighty easy to hit a fuel truck or another ship and clip off part of the wing or stabilizer. And that doesn't help the flying characteristics a bit. Notice the flaps are kept in the up position. If you taxi with them down, the undersurfaces are likely to be damaged by pebbles blown back by the propellers. After you've stopped at the edge of the runway, put in your call to the control tower for permission to taxi on the runway. When the tower has given the clearance, move on the runway. Steer with the outboard engines, not the brakes. Excessive use of the brakes on a plane as heavy as this one will wear them out quickly. As the ship is turned around at the far end of the runway, notice again how the engines are used for steering. You can see the right propellers moving faster than the left. When you're at right angles to the runway, stop for the engine run-up. Tell the flight engineer to get ready to make his magneto check while you run the engines up, one at a time. First, press the propeller RPM switches to the increase position, holding them there until all the propellers are at maximum RPM. Next, turn the manifold pressure selector to position 8. With the knob in this position, the superchargers automatically provide military power. Now, advance the number 1 throttle, but slowly and gently, to 2,000 RPM. Hold this speed until the engineer tells you the magneto check is finished. Then press the propeller RPM switch to the decrease position until the tachometer drops about 200 RPM. Now flip the switch to the increase position and hold it there until the light on the co-pilot's instrument panel flashes, and then push the throttle to full open. The tachometer should show about 2,600 RPM for the number 1 engine, while manifold pressure should be around 47 inches. To see if the turbo is working properly, turn the manifold pressure selector towards 0. That should make the manifold pressure drop. The turbo's okay. Bring the throttle back to idling, around 550 to 600 RPM, and increase speed to 1200 to avoid fouling the spark plugs. Next, start on the number 2 engine. This same procedure is repeated for each engine. Now you're about set to take off. After you're cleared for takeoff, turn the plane the rest of the way around so that it points down the runway. And stop again while the co-pilot lowers the wing flaps about 25 degrees. He can tell when they're right by looking at the wing flap position indicator. And the gunners can check on the accuracy of the indicator by watching the flaps from their blisters. They report on the approximate flap position over the interphone. When the co-pilot tells you the flaps are okay, fasten your safety belt and set the manifold pressure selector to position 8. Next, set the propeller RPM switches to increase RPM and wait for the lights on the co-pilot instrument panel to flash. Then warn the engineer to be ready for takeoff. Stand by for takeoff. Now you push on the brakes, hard, and open the throttle slowly until the manifold pressure gauge reads about 40 inches. Then release the brakes. As you gather speed, slowly advance the throttles to full power and set the throttle brake. Manifold pressure should go up to 47 or 47.5 inches. RPM should go up to 2600. Continue accelerating down the runway until the indicated airspeed gets up to 95 miles per hour. Then slowly pull the control column back, putting the ship in a flying attitude. The plane takes off without further action on your part when it gets flying speed. The exact speed at which it will leave the ground depends on the weight. When the ship is airborne, apply the brakes to stop the wheels, and then have the co-pilot retract the landing gear. He has to hold the landing gear retracting switch in the up position because the switch is spring-loaded. The co-pilot makes sure the nose gear is up by looking through the inspection door on the floor of the cockpit, just ahead of the aisle stand. The wheel is there, all right. At 160 miles per hour and 500 feet altitude, the co-pilot retracts the flaps, snapping the switch on and off until the indicator shows that the flaps are all the way up. The side gunners should be watching from their blisters as the plane takes off. They tell the co-pilot when the flaps and landing gear are up. Now you ought to change from takeoff power setting to climbing. Adjust the manifold pressure selector until the manifold pressure drops to 43 inches. And decrease propeller RPM to bring the tachometers to 2400. You can order the engineer to have the putt-putt turned off now and tell the bombardier to come forward and take his combat position in the nose of the ship. If this is an operational flight and enemy opposition is expected, have the men put on their flak vests. These vests are made of small overlapping links of tough steel sewn inside canvas. Quilting on the inside of the canvas provides further protection and also cushions the shock of impact. Above 10,000 feet, oxygen masks must be worn by one man in each compartment. When you reach the desired altitude, level off and tell the engineer to set up cruising conditions. First, you move the throttles back to about 65% of full power. Individual manipulation of the throttles may be necessary to keep each engine at the same manifold pressure. Now you adjust the propellers and manifold pressure, so turn the controls over to the co-pilot. Start with the props. Press the propeller RPM switches to decrease and bring all 4 propellers to 2,000 RPM. Then turn the manifold pressure selector down until the manifold pressure drops to 30 inches. The needles should stay together in this case. There you are, 30 inches. Considerable juggling of throttles, propellers, and supercharger may be necessary before you get it just right, but that's how you get a B-29 into the air. It's a big, heavy, and powerful airplane. Bigger, heavier, and more powerful than anything you've ever flown. For that reason, It must be handled gently and precisely. You must carefully follow the prescribed procedures. Even a super bomber is no good to the Army if it's in little busted-up pieces. But don't get jittery. The 29 is a sweet ship to handle. When it stalls, the nose drops so that the plane automatically recovers. There's no tendency to spin. Stalling speed varies quite a bit naturally depending on weight and other conditions, but generally it's between 84 and 135 miles per hour. When turning or executing any maneuver, take it easy. This is a big plane, remember, not a fighter. Yet fairly steep turns can be made safely. This 30-degree bank can also be done with full flaps. That's about the limit. And when evasive action is necessary, you have plenty of tricks to pull. Just watch this B-29. And the B-29 does more than just fly well. It packs a terrific wallop. A wallop enemy fighters will quickly learn to fear. That turret you see moving is only one of the 5 on the ship, which mounts a total of 10 machine guns and 1 cannon. 4 of the turrets, 2 on top and 2 beneath the fuselage, can turn through 360 degrees in azimuth, 90 degrees in elevation. The tail turret is more restricted in movement, but it has a 20-millimeter cannon in addition to the twin 50s the others carry. But the big thing about the 29's armament is the fact that the gunners don't touch the guns. The guns are controlled remotely from special sights, and any gunner can fire almost any turret. For example, one side gunner might have control of 2 turrets, firing 4 caliber 50s at his target. That's only the beginning of the story about guns, so let's get back to what a pilot has to do. Now you're ready to land. Since you've descended below 10,000 feet, remove your oxygen mask. Tell the co-pilot to take over control of the ship so that you can get out of your flak vest. The vest is easy to take off. Just pull on the cord and it drops away. This speed of removal becomes important if you ever have to bail out, since the vest is worn over the parachute and, well, you figure it out. If you've been riding with the automatic pilot, turn it off. You can't use it for landing, of course, or when taking off, flying turbulent weather, or setting trim tabs. The co-pilot should now warn the crew to prepare for landing and tell the bombardier to climb out of his seat in the nose and get in back with the engineer. Then the co-pilot has the engineer start the putt-putt. You check the turret warning lights. All the lights are off. Then call the control tower and get landing instructions. At the same time, ask for the field barometric pressure and set the altimeter to correspond. Now the co-pilot hits the brakes to test the hydraulic pressure. Both normal and emergency systems should have 800 to 1,000 pounds. To find out about the emergency pressure, you have to ask the engineer. At the same time, you can see if he's ready to land and get his log. He has calculated the new weight and center of gravity, since you've used up a lot of gasoline by now. You should look the log over, but the co-pilot will check it carefully, examining the center of gravity and weight computations. The table on the instrument panel gives the stalling speed for the computed weight. The co-pilot tells you the stalling speed and also reports that everybody in the crew is ready to land. Next, you adjust the propeller RPM switches. Push them to increase until you get the tachometers to show 2100 RPM. Now adjust the manifold pressure selector to give you plenty of reserve power. Turn it all the way up to position 8, the setting for full military power. When the plane is slowed down to 180 miles per hour or less, order the co-pilot to lower the landing gear. When the switch is set to the down position, the wheels descend all the way, lock, and the gear motors automatically stop. When the left and right gear are down, the side gunners, who should now be watching the wheels and flaps, will report to the co-pilot. He himself can make sure the nose wheel has been lowered all the way by looking through the window in the floor of the cockpit. Next, the flaps should come down. If you've been in combat, the co-pilot should lower them first only 5 degrees. If they were damaged, lowering them all the way might rip them off the wing. The gunners can look them over and report on their condition. The flaps are all right, so the co-pilot can lower them 25 degrees. Notice that he snaps the switch on and off. That way, the flaps descend gradually, and a sudden change in the lift characteristics of the airplane is avoided. The gunners will report when the flaps appear to be down 25 degrees, and the co-pilot can check by looking at his wing flap position indicator. When he has the flaps where he wants them, he'll tell you. Then you'll probably have to reset the trim tabs because of the change in the flap position. Next, adjust the throttle brake to a comfortable tension. And don't forget to turn off the detonator power switch. Now make a standard approach, keeping the speed about 30 miles per hour above stalling. And on the final approach, order the co-pilot to lower the flaps all the way. When you touch the ground, the plane should be slightly tail low and going between 95 and 100 miles per hour. Notice how the main wheels bear most of the shock of landing. Then the ship slowly settles forward. Don't apply brakes immediately. Let the plane lose some of its speed rolling. Then turn the manifold pressure selector all the way back to 0. You won't need the turbos anymore. And set the propellers at increase RPM. Raise the flaps now while you're taxiing and have plenty of power. You're down now. You've followed your checklist step by step. But there are other checklists, the engineers, for example. So suppose we go back over that landing procedure and see how the engineer's checklist fits in with yours. 5 minutes before landing, the engineer tells the tail gunner to start the putt-putt. The ship enters the traffic pattern at a 45-degree angle to the downwind leg. Altitude is 2760, speed is 180. Here the co-pilot lowers the wheels. The mixture controls are set to auto-rich, and the cowl flaps open 15 degrees. At the end of the downwind leg, the speed should be about 140 or 150, and at least 3 generators must be on. The co-pilot lowers the flaps 15 degrees. After the pilot makes the procedure turn, the altitude should be 2260 feet. The co-pilot lowers the flaps to 25 degrees. The pilot sets the manifold pressure selector to position 8 and adjusts the propellers to 2100 RPM. Just before the final turn, the engineer checks the magnetos and turns the boost pumps on. Around the turn, on the final approach, speed should be at least 140, altitude 800 feet. Also, 6 generators should be on. Finally, the co-pilot lowers the flaps all the way and calls out airspeed and hydraulic pressure as the ship descends to the runway. After the airplane's on the ground, turbos come off and propellers are set to full increase RPM. The engineer switches the boost pumps off and opens the cowl flaps all the way. All right, we're back where we were before. Tell the bombardier to come forward and open the bomb bay doors. The doors should always be kept open when the ship is standing still to prevent the accumulation of gas fumes. Next, turn off all the switches. Then you can get rid of some of your equipment that remains inside the ship and climb out for the after-flight inspection. Yes, you start with an inspection and finish with an inspection. If there was anything wrong, now is the time to find out about it. And now is the time to correct it. Yes, this is the airplane that you've been promised. Now it's up to you to weld this airplane and its crew into a single, irresistible instrument of destruction. That can be your promise to us.
Yes, here's the B-29, your super fortress. And those are its 4 Wright 3350 engines. This is the sound of 8,800 horsepower. Yes, 8,800 horsepower. That's what they'll give you if this man, this B-29 flight engineer, knows his job. The ground crew maintains the engines, keeps them in condition to deliver their tremendous power. But once in the air, it's up to the flight engineer to get that power from them. It is he who must be able to interpret these instruments and adjust these engine controls so that the pilot gets exactly the power he wants and gets it economically. But the flight engineer's job is more than just flying. It begins on the ground, right here, with the other members of the flight crew as they inspect their B-29 before a simulated operational flight. Each man has work to do before the airplane moves off the parking aprons. For example, here's the top gunner preparing his twin 50s for action while the ground crew is servicing the airplane, topping off the gas tanks, getting the fire extinguishers in place for engine starting. And here are the pilot and co-pilot completing their last check before takeoff. But this is the man we're interested in, the flight engineer. Last trip there was trouble with the waste gate on number 3 outboard turbo. Sure, it's been fixed. But just the same, the flight engineer is the one who's finally responsible. So he checks for himself. Yes, if you're part of a B-29 crew, you have to know your job. But that's not enough. You've got to know the other fellow's job, too. Not just theoretically, but well enough to substitute on no notice at all. Today, for example, the pilot has decided to check out Lieutenant Anderson, ordinarily the co-pilot, as a flight engineer. Yes, you, Lieutenant. You've been warned about this. Now let's see how well you've prepared yourself. First of all, Mr. Flight Engineer, better get started on the bookkeeping.
Well, flight engineer for a day. That's me. It looks like I've got all the dope right here in this clipboard. Forms 1, 1A, Form F, and the flight engineer's log. I guess they'll tell me everything I'll need to know.
One thing you should pay particular attention to is the CG, center of gravity. It's 26% of the MAC, which is about right for this loading. Now they're ready to pull the engines through. No, let Anderson do it. He's flight engineer today, remember?
Okay, now let's see. What's the first thing I do? Well, if those engines are going to be pulled through, I'd better climb inside and take a look at the ignition switches. They're off. So it's okay for the men to go ahead in those engines. Oh, and while I'm here, I better check the dome and the governor pad. Sometimes they spring oil leaks. This one seems to be okay, but there are 3 more engines to take care of. After the last engine is pulled through, well, What does come next? Oh, sure, the putt-putt. Can't operate without that.
The tail gunner is already going over the generator. Check the oil, of course, and then make sure the emergency switch is set at normal. That's right. Now it's ready to deliver those 200 amps whenever you need them.
As long as I'm back here in this part of the ship anyway, might as well check the toolkits. There they are, underneath the top turret. The seals are unbroken, so that's all right. Everything else okay in here. Next, there's the cabin pressure regulators up in the gun control compartment. See that the lock is off. That means the regulator is in the automatic position. Got to check the lock on the other regulator, too. Now, better take a look at the emergency cabin pressure release valve. This one has to be closed. And see there's no loose equipment near to clog it. Well, that's about all there is to check back here. Oh, but one sure thing. I better take a look at the equipment in the bomb bay. Okay, portable emergency motor in flap operating position, right where it belongs. Turbo superchargers are next. Test hood for security. Take a look at the wastegate axle. Should have plenty of play, and no ballooning in the nozzle box. This is the last of the turbos. It's okay, too. Everything else seems to be in good shape. What's next? Oh, yeah, fire extinguisher in the right place.
All right, fall in for inspection. So get into your flying equipment, Anderson. Flight coveralls, parachute, gloves, boots, and don't forget your pistol and oxygen mask. The crew of a B-29 must be inspected before every flight, just like the airplane itself. The pilot's going to ask a lot of these men in the next dozen hours, so he makes sure that every man is physically able and properly equipped to perform his duties. And that means a careful, painstaking inspection, not just a quick check. Only when the pilot is satisfied that his crew will function at top efficiency, he orders them into the plane. That's right, Lieutenant. The B-29 is big, but it's still crowded inside. So carry in your flight equipment. You can put it all back on again later. As far as your new job, all you have to do is... Well, come on. What comes first?
What's the matter with me? What have I got a checklist for? Uh-huh. Battery switch. Battery switch on. Next is master ignition switch. Over there. Master ignition switch on.
Oxygen equipment?
That's right. Well, the mask looks okay. So, plug it in the regulator. Who left that auto mix off? That sure would waste oxygen. Pressure's 425, which is correct. And the emergency valve works. The blinker stays open. So that's that. Now, how about the portable oxygen bottle? Well, it's full. Pressure's 400.
The voltage regulator vent valves. They're next. One set of regulators is alongside the navigator's cabinet. The valve handle ought to be up on this installation. The other set is directly behind the engineer's panel, at the radio operator's left. This handle is also up, just as it should be. Okay, Lieutenant, that's taken care of. Now go on from there.
Wait and see G. Emergency motor. Okay. Cabin pressure relief valve. Turned all the way to high pressure position. Right. Better plug into the interphone circuit. Headset jack? No, it goes in the other socket. Okay. Now the mic into this one.
The co-pilot wants you to get the putt-putt going. So you use the interphone to call the tail gunner and tell him to start the power plant. Here's the proper starting procedure. Turn on the ignition switch and hold the generator switch in the start position. Move the control lever over to run, and after the putt-putt warms up for 2 or 3 minutes, snap the generator switch to the run position. Then snap the equalizer switch on.
Putt-putt running, so I'd better check the voltage. Selector switch set, voltage 28. And now what's on the checklist? Well, there's current available, so I can try out my heated flying suit. Have to turn the rheostat off before plugging in. Now to get connected up. Just slip this one jack into the socket, then twist the rheostat all the way to maximum. I should begin to cook pretty soon. While I'm waiting for the suit to warm up, I might as well check the fluorescent lights. Turn it on, twist the lens, and there you are. 2 more of them over on the left. Turn the switches on and look at the bulbs. All okay.
The co-pilot has the correct barometric pressure, so you can set your altimeters. Don't forget you've got 2 of them. Outside pressure 001, and cabin pressure the same, 001. And you'd better check the clock on the panel with Lieutenant Floyd's chronometer watch.
And now I can test the controls. Only maybe first that mixture lock should come off. Mixture controls move easily enough. And these throttles seem to be all right, too. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. Vacuum pump selector valve and the emergency cabin air valves. All moving free and easy. Gosh, it's hot in here.
Well, why don't you turn your rheostat off?
And next comes the hydraulic system. Gauges should read around 1,000, but there's only 200 pounds on the normal pressure gauge. Now to fix that, I push the hydraulic pump switch to emergency and hold it there until the pressure comes up to about 400. Then release the switch. It'll go back to auto. Open the hydraulic shutoff valve, and the pressure on each gauge should rise to 1,000. It did. So put the hydraulic pump switch on emergency again and see if the pressure climbs above 1,000. That shows the pump will charge both systems. Shut-off valve back to close. And then what's next? Never mind, I know. Parking brakes on, wheels chocked fore and aft. How about it, Captain?
The pilot has taken care of the parking brake, and he can look at the chocks on the left landing gear. Those on the right are checked by the co-pilot.
Form 1A shows how much gas and oil we have. So I check the figures with the gauge readings. All the tanks are full, and not much difference between the actual load and the gauge readings either. Now, where's that checklist? Auto syn inverter switch. Oh, there it is. 26 volts. One inverter's okay. Have to give it a chance to stop running before I try the other. 26 volts again. So, it's all right, too. Cowl flaps, oil cooler flaps, intercooler flaps. Well, the cowl flaps are first. The switches are spring-loaded. Have to hold them in the open position until the indicator is up to the last line. Wide open. Take a look outside at them to make sure. Yeah, they're open. Oil cooler shutters are next. Put each one of them in the auto position. Then the intercooler flaps. Push them to the open position and hold it until the pointers on the indicators are clear over, all the way open.
Turbo off, props in high RPM, the pilot's telling you. All right, open those fuel shut-off valves. That guard is to keep you from accidentally closing them. Now turn on the cabin pressure warning switch and you're ready for engine starting.
All right, let's get set. Fire extinguisher selector on #1 engine. Crack the #1 mixture control and set the fuel booster rheostat to give about 16 pounds fuel pressure. Then close the mixture control.
That knocks out your fuel pressure for now, but it'll come right back to the correct value when the engine's going, since the rheostat's all set. Not more than 30 minutes since the engines were pulled through. That's okay. Start 1. That's right. Crack the #1 throttle. 1,000 RPM position's about right. And now you're set. Only let's just take a minute to see exactly what switches you're going to use. First, the starter switches, and then right alongside them, the primer switches. And here's what you do. Hold the #1 starter switch and accelerate for 15 to 30 seconds. And while you're doing it, watch the load on the putt-putt ammeter.
Then turn the starter switch to start. After the propeller has made 2 revolutions, turn the magneto switch to both. And prime.
When the engine fires, move the mixture control to auto rich. Then release the starter switch at once, but continue to prime intermittently until the engine is running smoothly. Don't relax so quickly. You're not half through yet. What about nose oil pressure? You're in trouble if that doesn't hit 30 to 50 pounds within 30 seconds. Rear oil pressure must be 60 to 80 pounds. And fuel pressure has to stay between 15 and 18 pounds.
Okay, guess I'm ready for engine #2. All right, I wasn't going to forget the extinguisher.
Well, by now you ought to be an old hand at starting engines. So let's see how smoothly you can do it.
Fire extinguisher. Accelerate 15 to 30 seconds. Then snap it to start. After 2 revolutions, magneto switch to both, and prime. At 800 RPM, mixture controls to auto rich.
You needn't look so surprised. That's a new engine they just put in there. Maybe it's a little bit cranky. So turn off your magneto switch and start over again. No. You forgot to move #4 mixture control back to idle cutoff. Take a look at that gurgle tube out there. Now you'll have to blow all that excess gasoline out of the engine. Set the mixture control and switch off the ignition. Then open the throttle wide and turn the engine over twice with the starters alone. Now you can go ahead and start #4. But first give that starter a few seconds to cool off.
That's done it. Now let's have another look at that checklist. Oh, just one more thing. turn on the cabin air conditioning switches. And I can tell the pilot we're ready to taxi.
Hey, not so fast, Lieutenant. You still have to check cylinder head temperature. Oil pressure and fuel pressure. All normal.
So the pilot orders the generators on. Then he tells the bombardier to close the bomb bay doors.
He pulls the switch, and you and the gunners check to make sure the doors do close. Then it's stand by to taxi.
When the airplane reaches the runway, the engines must be checked. Now you can get set for takeoff. First, the pilot increases all throttles to 1500 RPM. Then checks the props to full decrease. Then to full increase. While he's doing that, check all the generators. Output voltage and amperage okay. So turn the generators off. Now that props and generators check out, the pilot pulls the throttles back to 700 RPM and tells you to check the magnetos. Advance number 1 throttle to 2000 RPM. Magneto switch to right. RPM should drop a little. Anything less than 100 is okay. Then back to both. And try the left magneto. 50 RPM drop again. That's all right. Back to both and return the number 1 throttle to 700 RPM. Go through the same procedure on all the other engines, one at a time. Mag's okay. So check all instruments for proper reading.
Now let's have a look at that checklist. Sure, oil pressure, nose and rear, fuel pressure, oil temperature, cylinder head temperature, all normal. Guess I'm ready to take off.
The pilot is ready too. He releases the parking brake and adjusts the engines for full military power. Turbos at position 8 and starts opening the throttles. And here's where you really get busy. Start the cowl flaps closing. Turn on the fuel booster pumps. Switch on each of the 6 generators as soon as you're up to 1400 RPM. Since no power check has been made, the co-pilot and engineer keep a close watch on RPM and manifold pressure during the first third of takeoff. If there were any abnormal reading, you'd have to call the pilot to cut off engines. Looks fine. And those cowl flaps. You have to keep them open as long as possible. Yet they must be down around 7.5 degrees before you leave the ground. That's not easy. And above everything, keep watching your cylinder head temperature and oil pressure. Of course, the pilot makes sure to put the wheel brakes on before the gears are retracted. As soon as you've got safe flying speed, you can open the cowl flaps as much as 10 degrees. But don't do it unless the cylinder heads are getting hot. And now the pilot can reduce power. He's still climbing, so he sets up condition 2. Once the gear and wing flaps are reported up,
Call the tail gunner to stop the putt-putt.
Right. And I can turn off the fuel booster pumps. Only make sure there's no drop in fuel pressure. And there isn't. Everything's okay. Guess we cruise here. 10,000 feet.
Yes, the pilot has leveled off and is now setting up cruising conditions. 2,100 RPM and 31 inches manifold pressure. That's cruising power. You can see it yourself.
Now I get busy. Turbos are off, so intercooler flaps ought to be closed. Then the mixture controls to auto lean. Tell the pilot, and do it. Easy does it with those controls. Jiggle them a bit until they snap into the detent position. And then lock them. Now cylinder head temperature. So I can close the cowl flaps a bit without raising the head temperatures.
Wait a minute. This is no time for the flight engineer to rest. You've got to keep your eye on those gauges every minute.
So let's check again just what you have to watch. Nose oil pressure, 30 to 50 pounds. Rear oil pressure, 60 to 70 pounds. Fuel pressure, 15 to 18 pounds. Cylinder head temperatures, not more than the maximum limit. And oil temperature, under 91.
Okay. Okay. What's the checklist say? Uh-huh. Look at the generators every 30 minutes. Output voltage not to exceed 28. And the ammeter should kick over about the same amount for each generator. They're charging evenly, all right. That's the 6 of them. All okay.
And another thing you have to do is fill out the engineer's log. You must record percentage of power used, airspeed, rate of climb, free air temperature, pressure altitude, cowl flap setting. Every 30 minutes, you must do that. But most important of all is fuel consumption. So now, after nearly 10 hours of flight, you know where you stand. The wing tanks are about half empty. The gauges show that plenty enough. There's plenty of gas in the bomb bay tanks, though. So let's get it out to the wing tanks where it will be some use.
All right. One fuel transfer valve at rear bomb bay position. Other at the number 4 wing tank position. Then turn on the fuel transfer switches. Pulling these two toward me makes the pump transfer from right to left. Then I just watch the gauge. When the needle shows that number 4 is full, turn the switches off. That ought to do it.
That's fine. But look what the pilot has to do to keep that wing up, and that's a dangerous condition. So now, move the right fuel transfer valve to the number 1 wing tank position and push the switches forward this time. That will pump gasoline out of number 4 into number 1. When the tanks are evened up, each one about 3/4 full, the airplane will be balanced again. Then you turn all the switches off. Naturally, tanks 2 and 3 would be filled the same way. What's the matter? Oh, something wrong with the number 4 engine.
Seems to be running a little rough. But don't feather it, as long as there's no other indication of trouble. Better keep your eye on those instruments.
Now your flight is almost over. The pilot gives the order, prepare to land.
Think I'll get rid of these heavy gloves.
You've got plenty to do.
Yeah. First, tell the tail gunner to start the putt-putt. Then shift the mixture controls to auto-rich. We're coming into the downwind leg of the landing pattern now. I've got a job ahead of me.
Yes, Lieutenant, you have a job ahead of you. A precision job. Because you must coordinate what you do with the pilot's procedure. All right. First thing, give the pilot the gross weight and new CG. Then the airplane enters the traffic pattern at an indicated airspeed of 180 miles per hour, 1,500 feet altitude. On the downwind leg, the co-pilot lowers the landing gear. The engineer checks the output voltage and amperage on all 6 generators and turns on the fuel booster pumps.
The pilot turns the turbo boost control all the way up to position 8. It sets the props to 2,400 RPM. Since turbos are now on, the engineer must open the intercooler flaps.
Check hydraulic pressure.
And set the cowl flaps to keep cylinder head temperatures between 150 and 160 degrees.
The co-pilot lowers the wing flaps 25 degrees. And you keep your eye on cylinder head temperature.
Just before lowering the wing flaps all the way, airspeed should be between 150 and 160, altitude 1,000. After the flaps are down, airspeed should be 30 miles per hour above stalling speed.
Check hydraulic pressure again. You will need it soon. And keep watching cylinder head temperature and oil pressure.
And now you're almost on the ground. The B-29 lands at 90 to 110 miles an hour.
As soon as the plane is down, start the cowl flaps opening. When the wing flaps are up, turn the generators off. Next, fuel booster pumps off. And now the cowl flaps should be wide open. Then a final check of hydraulic pressure. And last, the pilot turns the turbos off and sets the props to full increase position. You're down now, and that's the end of the flight.
And a tough one, too. Can't say I'm sorry to get out of this seat.
Not quite so fast, Lieutenant. You're not through yet. The engines are still running. You started them. You stop them.
Throttle back to 700 RPM. After head temperatures have dropped to 190, make a complete mag test. Open the bomb bay doors, then
mixture controls to idle cutoff. When the engines have stopped, open all throttles wide. Order the auxiliary power plant stopped. Then turn off all the switches.
Magnetos. Master ignition, battery, and inverter switch. Check the parking brake. It shouldn't be set until the brake drums are cool.
and after you've made sure that the wheels are chocked fore and aft, you're ready for inspection.
Yes, there's an after-flight inspection, too. Well, Lieutenant, now you've got an idea of what the flight engineer has to do. At least what he has to do during the flight. Remember how that number 4 tachometer needle was fluctuating?
There wasn't anything that you could do about it while you were flying, but it meant a lot to Lieutenant Floyd.
It meant that new engine was running rough. So now he's going to see that it's fixed. He'll talk it over with the crew chief, and together they will track down the trouble. Yes, they'll both work on it. The engineer could just tell the crew chief what's wrong and forget about it until the next flight. But not if he's a good engineer. Those 4 engines are his responsibility. The only way he can be sure they're properly maintained is to check for himself. This trouble may take a long time to fix. 8 hours isn't too much to allow for changing a magneto. But he'll keep at the job until it's finished. That's the kind of thing an engineer is expected to do.